Lieutenant Eric Lawson hadn't slept properly in weeks. It wasn't the harsh recycled air or the thrum of the cruiser engines that kept him awake. It was the dreams, relentless and vivid. Fire raining from the sky, his wife's screams echoing over a comms channel gone dead. The grotesque twist of Thrax's limbs against the backdrop of his burning home city. They said he was lucky to be alive. He was fortunate to be a survivor and a hero. He felt more like a ghost, a walking shell, echoing with the horrors he'd barely escaped. His summons came on the heels of another sleepless night. Not to the sterile med bay where they offered medication that dulled the screams, but blurred the sharp edge of focus he still desperately clung to. No, this was the briefing room, smelling faintly of too strong sanitizer and nervous sweat. The faces assembled weren't familiar among the grim Federation bigwigs, save for one unexpected figure in Earth's battered combat armor. General Thorne, a living legend with haunted eyes the exact shade of Eric's nightmares, cut to the chase. Lieutenant, you and your squad volunteered for specialized duty. This mission requires a unique skill set. His voice hitched ever so slightly, betraying the tension beneath his usual gruffness. They laid it out. The Lazarus Resurrection Project, a blurred line between medicine and madness that could supposedly cheat death itself. It was experimental, ethically murky, and desperately needed for a high-stakes rescue mission on a volatile outpost. Eric's role, to test this horror in his veins, to die on command, only to be jerked back to a life shadowed by the unnatural process. Fear wasn't the emotion that choked him. It was a bitter sort of desperate hope, the same clawing tenacity that had seen him haul his wounded sergeant through the burning ruins when his legs had felt like shattered glass. If this experiment could, in the future, bring back just one of those someone had lost, if it could prevent another family from knowing the echoing silence he lived with, perhaps the sacrifice of his own sanity was a price he could pay. After all, he had nothing to go back to. His wife and his home were all gone. All he had now was his duty. He heard his own voice, steadier than he felt. "I'm ready, sir." There was no going back, not when he saw the desperate gleam reflected in the general's eyes. Earth's future, it seemed, would be bought with a handful of volunteers, willing to become something a little less than human. They didn't waste time on false comforts. He was strapped to a table that was far too reminiscent of the med bay after the ambush that took his wife and his home. The scars on his body were a roadmap of battles that barely survived. The injection burned like acid as it seeped into his system. Then the countdown. His world was reduced to a series of beeps, each one marking the seconds before his heart was forced to give out. Death was not what he expected. Not darkness, not a comforting void, but a disorienting dislocation. His body became a distant thing, a malfunctioning machine. At the same time his awareness flickered, a desperate spark fighting to remain amidst the encroaching static. It felt like drowning, like being torn apart from the inside out, a kaleidoscope of memories flashing past. His final scream lost in a surge of agonizing nothingness. And then, a jolt. A breath he hadn't known he was holding forced its way back into his lungs. His eyes snapped open to the same harsh lights and sterile walls. He should have felt triumphant, vindicated, and alive. Instead, coldness clawed at his insides. Something was wrong. Something had shifted within him, like a vital piece of his humanity had been left behind in that chasm between life and death. The test began with a relentless battery of physical and cognitive checks. He moved as ordered and answered questions with rote precision, masking the gnawing unease. The head scientist, Vicar, called this violation of the natural order a success. Yet he saw how the other scientists and medical staff watched him, their eyes holding both awe and a flicker of instinctive revulsion. He was a miracle and a monster all at once. After an allotment of time passed with successful checks, the Federation military staff briefed him on the mission. An outpost overrun, diplomatic hostages held by a splinter faction. The whole situation, a galactic powder keg. His job? To be the bait, to die as spectacularly as possible. buying time for an extraction team spearheaded by his comrades from Plague Squad. Then he'd rise again, a walking distraction fueled by stolen moments of existence, while his squad did the real work of securing the hostages. The plan was chilling in its ruthless efficiency. He was no longer just a soldier, but a blunt and terrifying weapon. A weapon they planned to use until he was truly, irrevocably broken. The choice was an illusion. He knew that with cold certainty. The ghosts of his lost platoon from a battle long ago whispered in his fractured mind. He could go back to the nightmares that haunted his sleepless nights, or he could fight, even if he was fighting with nothing left but bitter defiance, and a life that was no longer truly his own. "I understand the mission, sir. I'm ready when you are," he confirmed to his Alaxian Federation officer, and he meant it. He was trapped in a nightmare far worse than any the Thrax invasion had wrought. At least in this hell, he could still choose which way to suffer. The head scientist, Vikar, was a paradox who was known only in the Galactic Federation for his brilliant mind. He chattered with the disconcerting enthusiasm of a pioneer discovering a groundbreaking scientific phenomenon, his eyes glinting with a mix of awe and unease. The translator chirped out his endless questions, neural response times, trauma recall intensity, the peculiar way his muscles spasmed moments after regaining consciousness, a clinical curiosity that sent shivers of revulsion down Eric's spine. The Federation medical staff touched him with the detached professionalism of a mechanic fine-tuning an engine, yet Eric sensed a dissonance beneath the surface. The way Vikar sometimes hesitated, his delicate fingers hovering over Eric's scars as if grappling with an instinctual disgust. It was a disgust Eric shared, a visceral hatred for this body that was now both a marvel and an abomination. He couldn't sleep in the sterile medbay quarters. The endless beeps and the recycled air that tasted of metal and disinfectant became unbearable reminders of his new monstrous senses. With chilling efficiency, the Federation prepared him for his first mission. His body was calibrated and honed into a weapon they'd reload as needed. Vikar monitored his vital signs, his usual prattle replaced by a tense silence that somehow felt more accusatory than any outright confrontation. Then one night the nightmares changed. Instead of fire and the screams of his dead platoon, he saw himself mirrored in Vikar's eyes, a dissected specimen, a creature spliced together from broken fragments of a man. He'd wake, gasping, his heart a frantic echo of the flatline they'd repeatedly forced him into. One gray, sterile morning, as Vikar fussed over a readout that indicated a spike in stress hormones, Eric could no longer hold back. "You think I'm a freak," he exclaimed, the words thick with self-loathing. Vikar froze, his usually vibrant eyes paling. "Lieutenant," he began, the translator rendering his voice oddly formal, "your resurrection is a triumph. It represents a perversion," Eric cut in, his voice trembling with a fury he barely recognized. "You can dress it up in whatever euphemisms you like, but you know what I am. A puppet, a thing to be used until it breaks completely." Silence stretched thick and brittle. Then Vikar spoke, his voice quiet yet resonant. "Perhaps you are right." The admission was shocking, a crack in his scientific detachment. "But we do this because we must. Unfortunately, the Federation craves absolutes such as victory, immortality, and the illusion of security. You, Lieutenant, you are a brutal reminder that there is always a price." Vikar met the lieutenant's eyes, and for the first time, he saw not just fear, but a strange, mournful pity. The bond between them remained fractured for the moment. Yet, however brutal, the honesty carved a space within the horror. Eric was a walking monstrosity, a blunt instrument in the hands of the Federation. And perhaps in his twisted way, he understood Vikar's grim resolve. They were both prisoners of this chaotic miracle, trapped within this dance of death and forced resurrection.